Nick,
You.
thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Gordon.
Yeah, nice one, nice one. Well, I'm looking forward to this, and I kind of know some tantalizing hints of this, but I'm going to ask the traditional first question anyway. Nick, were you a weird kid?
I was a weird kid. Yeah, definitely. Um, I don't know. I used to, geez, okay, this sprang to mind. When I was learning how to swim, I'd always dive and then kiss the bottom of the pool out of some weird OCD obsession, and I had to do it every time. And then one day, the swim teacher pulled me aside and said, "Yo, Nick, what are you doing?" And my parents are called in, and then everyone was like pointing and laughing at me, and I was like, "Oh, no one else does this. Okay." And then it just kind of snowballed from there.
Interesting. What made you think of that? Because I sort of had dove into some of your previous writings on Medium, and so you
Oh,
kiss pools, and you got a thing for mountains.
I don't know. That just sort of sprang to mind. But then I think really what happened is that I haven't really had a proper job for most of my life. So I'm just allowed to sort of free range do whatever I want. And so I
Gotcha.
think when people are left to their own devices, inevitably they will follow their internal weirdness. Like my theory is that everyone is actually pretty weird, but they're very suppressed on a level because they haven't actually explored that weirdness due to economic demands and fear. But
Absolutely. And yeah, cultural pressure, all the rest of it. I mean, maybe other kids wanted to kiss the pool.
I think they did secretly, definitely. And maybe in the future I'll start an online tutorial about that.
Yeah. Nice one. So, I mean, that leapt to mind, given how your life, as you say, never really. We'll get to the adult career, and not the adult career, but the career as an adult. In due course, but other than pool kissing, given where your life has gone and so on, were there any foreshadowings of that as a kid? Did you live in a haunted house? Were you abducted by aliens? The usual.
I remember very clearly when I was about 4, I could see like weird little floating spirit lights around my room all the time. And I point them out to my brother, and when I pointed them out to him, he could see them. And all the way through school and high school, there was this one book called The Modern Mysteries of the 20th Century. And I was just fascinated by this whole book, which is all about ghosts and UFOs and weird creatures and, cryptozoology and stuff like that. And then through high school, I was always reading stuff about spirituality and the occult and stuff like that. I just didn't really know that it could become a career in my later life. And then, yeah, so it was always in the back of my mind. Even when I was a comedian, I was always reading this stuff. And it was only when I started working with the psychedelic plants when I was like, oh shit, this stuff is actually experientially real. Whatever you want to define real as. So that's when it sort of went more into my consensus reality existence.
Yeah, I like that. So you mentioned the comedian thing. Did you bring any of that awareness to it? Because comedy's sort of archetypally, when it's done right, which it almost never is. Although I'm
Mm-hmm.
quietly confident for independent comedy at the moment, referencing people like Tim Dillon and so on. But when it's
Yeah,
done right, it is archetypally significant. Like like a jester in a cosmic court. It is actually supposed to describe and point out reality. You know what I mean?
I
So
agree.
were you
Yeah, definitely.
were you sort of aware? Because you started quite young. You should give the story for the majority non-Australian audience. But were you sort of aware as you're going in, if teenage Nick was interested in cryptozoology and UFOs and ghost stories, and then sort of begins this comedy career, were you
Mm-hmm.
aware that it was like a comedy performance in both the right and the wrong hands is a ceremony? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, like the best comedians are very shamanic. They're converting negative or dark material into laughter and releasing it in a cathartic way. Like you said, there's very few comedians who actually do that. I was trying to do that, but I was trying it a little bit too hard. And also I hadn't done enough personal work to be able to anchor that.
Yeah.
So what happened was that I actually was like, okay, what's the most horrible thing I can think of? And then I'll try and write a joke about it. And it's that Nietzsche quote, if you stare into the abyss for too long, something deep. And that's what happened to me. I just sort of got swallowed up by the machine, And also when I was talking about, not that I did it, I used to do like jokes about sigil magic and my UFO encounter, but the audience doesn't really relate to that. I mean, I'm playing to a pub audience in the middle of the countryside, and you're like, hey, what's the deal with chaos magic? And, you know, you just hear crickets. So that whole side was not really expressed very well. Although ironically, during the latest section of my comedy career, I had this whole bit about how I wasn't actually a comedian, I was a spiritual healer. And then that ended up sort of becoming vaguely true. Not that I'd claim myself to be a spiritual healer, because that opens myself up to attack.
That's very, yeah. I've had a few people on recently who knew Pablo Amaringo and others, and he got sick of being an ayahuasquero because he got sick of the sorcerers coming for him because he was so good at it. So I was like,
yeah. Luckily, we don't have sorcery yet in the ayahuasca scene here in Australia.
No, not to that extent. It's definitely, yeah, it's a big deal in Pucallpa, and it's funny now that having sat with medicine in you know, Peru and here, I'm like, oh, it's less of a traumatic assault going out to the bathroom. Here,
yeah,
beings waiting, you know.
Yeah, there's not so much of a tradition of that here, unless you're, well, I live in Darwin, so there's obviously a lot of black magic going up in the indigenous folks up here that I hear about, and I've had to clear curses put on people, which was weird, and that ended up getting onto me. So that was a bit of a trial by fire learning process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely get to that. I want to say, so the UFO encounter you tried to make into a bit that wouldn't land with audiences, was that before, did that happen as a kid, or did that happen after your psychedelic experiences, that kind of thing?
No, that happened during my comedy career, and we were just sitting on a beach completely sober, and my friend, who's pretty much like a Asian version of Lisa Simpson, was like, hey, what's that light in the sky? This was in Colorado Plateau in Sydney, so it was a pretty suburban place, probably 2006-ish, sort of around then. And I can't say that I saw aliens, but I just saw a flying object that we couldn't identify. We spent half an hour going, is it this, is it that, is it that? And then we just ran out of things, and we just realized, oh, it's a UFO. So
is it definitionally because you couldn't identify it as a UFO?
Yeah, it was flying in ways that I couldn't, that was not anything that we were familiar with, you know, zigzags, loop-de-loops, figure eights, that sort of stuff.
Nice one. So we kind of went through that and into the comedy career, and that's a good example of it. Do you think comedy has, maybe not comedy has changed, but do you think an audience now, not that I'm suggesting you get back into comedy, although it's arguable where the limits of that career or field begin and end, right? So leaving that aside, do you think an audience would be more amenable to it now? Do you know what I mean? Do you think the world has changed as well as you?
I think the world's fractured heaps. So the audiences tended to be pretty homogenous when I first started out. It was like country crowds versus city crowds. That was pretty much the only division I could see. And then what happened with the woke culture stuff, you couldn't even address certain topics without people going, ooh, and getting offended on everyone's behalf. And now it seems like with the fracturing of the mainstream media, as everything's going into like niche groups and polarization, I think the best bit is actually to build an audience and then just play to your cult, which is kind of elitist in a way and has its own problems. But I'm not really sure how else you'd play it. And also the live scene's completely fucked basically because of COVID. So yeah, I haven't actually been keeping tabs on the comedy scene because like you said, it's most of it doesn't really interest me with where I'm at these days. Yeah, so.
And is that, I mean, we should talk about that, because presumably it was quite intoxicating at the time, like literally intoxicating in the sense of drinking till 5 a.m. in some basement and whatever. But yeah, I didn't have a comedy career, although, you know, I get laughed at all the time. But
it's never too late, man.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Southern Tasmania's best, like the Southern Tasmanian circuit. Yeah, that's the big
I've done
time.
gigs there. I can hook you up.
But I did have a career that paid really well and involved lots of booze and having fun and doing things I didn't hate at the time, but if you tried to get me to do them now, I absolutely would, like advertising and so on. But it was good. I won't pretend it wasn't good. It was very unhealthy, but I won't pretend it wasn't good at the time in your 20s, having money and drugs and booze and late nights and whatever. Was that, I mean, did you enjoy it until you didn't? Do you know what I mean?
I enjoyed it heaps, man. You know, you're 20, life's an adventure. You're not thinking about the future. So I had an absolute blast, man, just traveling around. I was living the dream. I really was. But then you hit 30 and you're like, oh shit, this has better turn into something. And then I'd do these weird gigs out in the middle of nowhere and you'd spend 5 hours in a car with a really embittered comedian pushing 50. And my dream slowly went from, hey, I want to be good, well known, to like, I just don't want to become this guy. So, and I guess I saw it as a persona that had reached its end point. You know, I'd lived out that karma. My grandfather ran a circus, so I felt like that was that side of the family karma being lived out. And my other grandfather was a healer, so I felt like I was moving into that. So I had an absolute blast. I really did, and I don't regret it at all. But yeah, definitely, there was about the last 4 or 5 years was my wheels in the air spinning upside down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did that realization, I mean, we'll talk about your sort of journey with plant medicine, but did that realization emerge spontaneously, or was there a period where you kind of sit with the medicine in particular and go like, it turns out there's
leaking.
authenticity critique I could look at in my life here.
Well, it was leaking through, but you know, the ego is very good at denial because it doesn't want to change. So it would be constantly leaking through and be like, no, it's everything's fine. It'll turn into something. And then, yeah, I was about to book a flight to America to try my shot there. And then I was like, I better try this ayahuasca thing. Well, I'd been trying to find it for 3 years, and then eventually I just found it. And yeah, my first journey, my intention was, how do I be a better comedian? And the ayahuasca told me, quit, it's killing you. And that still took another 3-4 years to die, that that path. But yeah.
Was ayahuasca your first entheogen? I mean, you said you were looking for that for 3 years. What was your first? Tell us about your first time.
Oh man, I did way too much acid in high school. That's really where it started. My first entheogen, I probably would say, was that little spinning contraption at the playground where you spin around a lot.
Yeah,
that was probably my first entheogen. My first proper one was LSD when I was 15 in high school. And then I was like, whoa, this is great. And then let's do it way too much while my brain is developing. And yeah, so I always loved the psychedelics, and they were like, that was the second half of my life, as well as comedy, because, you know, a lot of my favorite comedians, Bill Hicks and Stanhope and all these other comedians, they always were heaps into the psychedelics. And so I did find it helped me with divergent thinking and coming up with more creative angles, because it's psychedelics break your frames, so you're able to see things from different perspectives. Yeah, so my first entheogen was LSD, and then I just kept looking for as much different stuff I could find, really. Yeah,
it's interesting. Like I see how LSD, because I did LSD as a teenager as well, and you know, I turned out LSD. My experience of it, going back to it in adult years, is that it's not a being in the same way psilocybin or ayahuasca is. It's that classic doors of perception thing. Like you, with LSD, you are permanently, and you have a bones deep understanding of that classic doors of perception thing, that like this, you are constructing, right? And that's actually quite good if you can see the sort of artifice of reality, if you're critiquing it from a comedic perspective. But it's funny, like maybe it's because it's artificial or something, but with something like ayahuasca or psilocybin, I encounter a being, and I consider that one an entheogen. Does that resonate for you?
That resonates. I mean, I found LSD quite cerebral and harsh in my brain. Although one time when I was in India, I actually did it ceremonially. This is before I got on the psychedelic path, but I got into, I connected with Shiva on my trip to India, and I ended up doing it as a Shiva ritual. And that was a completely different journey, rather than just taking a tab and going to a festival. And while I didn't communicate to the spirit of LSD, I was pulled out of my body and was watching civilizations sort of get born and die very quickly.
That's
Which
good.
was,
That's good Shiva magic.
yeah. Well, they'll
Yeah.
Shiva LSD trips, so.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. No, I see what you mean there. So the last time I did it in a proper ritual context was a few years ago in Melbourne for a Jupiter Kazemi, and the Airbnb apartment that I had turned into this Jupiter temple, and it was like pillars and all that. So again, I don't think it's a being. I think it's a substance that allows, I think it literally
Yeah, I know
clears
what you
the way for
mean.
perception.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Interesting.
very diffuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think, because you sort of wrote about this in January in an article that I quite liked, do you think you have to be broken to be good at comedy? Is that a problem? Like,
You have to be on some level broken, but functional. So there's like these two sort of Venn diagrams of like brokenness and functionality, and you have to meet somewhere in between. So there are heaps of comedians that you'll never hear about because they're way too dysfunctional to ever get ahead. I guess I was kind of one of them, maybe. But um, what can happen though is then your act becomes about how broken you are, and you become attached to the broken self identity. And so I've been trying to get a lot of my comedian friends to do the medicine, and one of them was actually like, man, I'm actually just afraid of healing, because if I heal, I don't have an act anymore, and there's my paycheck. So then there's a whole cultural, stereotype of the broken comedian. But I've met comedians that aren't so broken, but I just never really found them. They can't get to that nugget, the deep stuff. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Because they haven't tasted that pain or the wound, which I
yeah.
think is what good comedy's trying to lance.
A well-rounded comedian isn't Orphic enough. It's not sort of, shouting blistering truths. I think the trouble is that the other thing I was thinking about this is, as you say, you didn't want to be the 50-year-old. So you got to 30 and say, well, if I don't heal, I end up having to perform a broken persona, and the trouble is you do get a lot of positive reinforcement for it. So and
Yeah.
consequently you end up, for Americans who won't know who this is, you end up Judith Lucy. So you end up in your 50s complaining about men as if
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
you're still like dating, and you're still 28 and dating, and it's because you haven't healed, or if you have, you're performing a brokenness for positive
Yeah.
feedback. And I
Yeah.
don't know if that's a great way to live. Sorry, Judith.
It's not healthy. And also what happened to me is the other thing that the ayahuasca told me on my third journey was like, firstly, get over yourself and go do charity work in your home country, which is Nepal. So I went back and I basically did earthquake relief work when the earthquake hit in 2015. And then my perspective was really sort of widened. And I remember I flew from there to LA, and I thought, well, may as well give this comedy shot thing. I'm here in LA. And I remember just watching these comedians just complain about stuff that really wasn't that bad, So the brokenness, it was a very self-absorbed, self-obsessed kind of brokenness. And after being just, in towns which were completely demolished, I was like, it's actually pretty good here. I might hate myself, but I can work on that. So that was the other thing which sort of hit home and sort of made me go, okay, what's going on here?
So one of the things that I really resonate with in how you describe this is because I just had my ayahuasca down here. What week is this? Weekend before last, for the first time to have ceremonies on my farm.
Okay.
And there were a couple of people who were in ceremony with us who hadn't sat with the medicine before.
Mhm.
And we're talking about it afterwards, as you do. And the way you talk about it is the same as I do, which is like I have conversations with ayahuasca. Like she told me
Yep.
this and whatever.
Yep.
And was that always like from your first thing? Because tell me about that. I don't know if you've had the same situation where, particularly for the first few times, people are just kind of like floored by
Yep.
it. But from the first step in, she was reading me to filth.
Yeah. I've had those ones. Yeah. Well, I mean, my theory is that everyone has a primary perceptual sense that they favor over others. So what I've seen and talked to other people is that I have a primarily auditory sense. So that's how I interpret the world mainly. So people like that, I'll literally hear the plant medicine spirits communicate to me telepathically. I have friends who are more kinesthetic, so they'll actually never talk to them, but they'll just sort of feel them, and then an insight will come through their body. And then I've also got friends who are purely visual, so they'll just communicate to them visually. But my first experience, I didn't actually talk to the ayahuasca spirit, but I talked to Gaia, the collective intelligence of planet Earth, and she told me, help me. And I was a pretty cynical nihilist at that point, and I was like, what the fuck is this Avatar shit, man? Like,
Yeah.
so I was like, okay. And yeah, that was my first experience. And then it was around the third one when I had a really solid communication. And since then, it comes and goes. Sometimes she communicates more cryptically, sometimes more in an obtuse manner. But yeah, with most of the plant medicines, I'll be able to hear them talk to me. But
Interesting. So
yeah.
I like that. I think I'm the middle one then. I think it's that kinesthetic awareness where I get it like an instantaneous gestalt.
Yeah.
But it's communication. It was and it's a lot. It was really quite impressive from the first time it happened. You're in dialogue or in relation with a being, and it's sort of fun to hear other people's version of that. Like on the Dieta a couple of years ago in Peru. Although people would have different experiences.
Which plant did you do?
So I did Chuchuasi, Akimiseba, and I can't remember the last one. I did 3 C's.
Okay.
It was amazing. But yeah, but during ceremony, like ayahuasca ceremony, when we were talking about it the next day, I had a kind of cleaner understanding of what she and I were talking about, and people would have different experiences of it. We went around the 20 of us, and everyone was kind of going through the same theme. So it was very interesting that she'd show up and everyone would get that, and then next time they'd get that, and whatever. But it's one of those, you come away from it realizing that you are a human interacting with like a much smarter than you non-human intelligence. It is different to LSD, which is almost like allows you to behold the glory of human perception. But with ayahuasca, it's a being, and I thought that's kind of an interesting distinction.
It gets muddy though, because I feel like your own noise can get into the channel, and sometimes your own shit comes through and you can mistake that as the ayahuasca because you're completely out of it, and later on you latch onto some message that was really a reflection of your ego because it sounds good and feels good to your corresponding wounds. So it can get muddy in there, and I have noticed there is different levels of, like, I wouldn't say truth, but like directness with communication between the different plant spirits. So Iboga, for example, or San Pedro the cactus, quite direct for me. They'll just tell it to you directly. This is the score. And the ayahuasca will tell me more cryptically, won't necessarily be the truth. It will lead me astray sometimes, but maybe there's a lesson at the end of that. So, yeah.
I think she tells me gently, or she lets me come to the conclusion. Like there's a whole bunch of trauma, as is usually the case, of why I went into Peru to do it the first time. And the first night, I was just thoroughly enjoying it, just like, woo.
Yeah.
And the next night, she was kind of like, okay, sit down. It's time to work. And I'm like, why didn't you show up like this before? And she said, you were off running with your brothers, as in spirits and beings. And it was part of, she was that sort of hyper intelligence of the thing I actually needed from a most healing perspective was just to have like a really nice fucking bull trip, right? And like the last one, what she landed on in terms of what I needed to, I think you make a really good point, which is your ego or a whole bunch of stuff there can be noise on the line. And probably a good rule of thumb or yardstick is if the message hurts, it's probably authentic.
Yeah. If you're like, oh shit, I really have to do that, I'm afraid. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Or if it hits you in your body, that's what I've noticed. If it's in your head, then I'm like a bit cynical now or skeptical. If I feel it in my heart or in my gut, that's when I'm like, okay, this is one I have to listen to. Yeah. But I've seen her do that trick where the first timers will have a really beautiful time, and it's just to rope them in, man. It's a classic pullback and reveal. And then the second one's, all right, here's your shadow. So yeah, totally.
She can do that in trip. So in my case, it was because the ayahuasca here, she's Australian, but she's been trained. She spent a couple of years in the jungle and is probably lineage, blah, blah, blah. And she sings an Icaro that's the same, but obviously sung differently, very similar to one that my ayahuasquero in Peru sings. So as she's singing it, I'm right back walking out of the Maloka to the hole in the ground / toilet with a friend who was there, like in that way that you are there, that the sort of Proust in the Madeleine, I'm immediately there. And I loved it because it was one of the peak times in my life to be in Peru for that month doing it. It's honestly been, especially over the last, with the state trapping us in the country for this long and whatever, it's a feeling that I would return to a lot. And so as I came in, like sort of floating down in this wonderful memory, ayahuasca's like, are you ready to let this go? And I'm like, oh, she's like, and I didn't, it never occurred to me that I had a pathological, it's okay to like look back fondly on some good memories, but I was pathologically sort of sitting in this feeling and it was disrupting, I guess like future energy. It was getting in the way. And I'm like, oh, that's what this is going to be about. And it was sort of like, not yet. And so she kind of loops back around and you get the visuals, la, 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 la. And then she'll come back and touch it again. Are you ready yet? And that night was like the purge of my career because I was basically purging Peru. And I'm like, are you breaking up with me? And yeah, she wouldn't be drawn on it. Like, will I ever get back to Peru? It's like, don't even think that now. Just it all goes in the bucket. And then like, so that was a communication that hurt because it was like the thing I valued most. But she was right. Like I was pathologically attached to that. And I think it's a good yardstick. If it hurts when she touches it and then you fill a bucket, you've probably found what you were supposed to go into ceremony for.
Yeah, that's true, man. So that feeling, you mean that's like you're attached to the feeling of like the sort of euphoria of the ayahuasca, or like sitting in the whole positive memories?
Just obsessing with something that's never going to happen again, right? So it's 2019. I was having this amazing time in Peru after like a whole bunch of trauma, like the fires that were down here that almost destroyed the farm and so on. Off I go to Peru, and it was just like the peak. I struggle to find times in my life that I enjoyed more, and so I would be, especially in the last 15 months. I would almost stew in that feeling. And she's like, that's not. And it never occurred to me that was sort of impacting like my future energy, my momentum.
I get you.
Like, too much energy was sort of caught in how I thought of these memories, because even if I didn't, I would consciously say it's 2019 is never happening again, but unconsciously I'm sort of projecting into the future this version of myself that never happens again. And so it was that was what she made me release. And I'm like, wow. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Buy me dinner.
Yeah. I gotcha. Yeah.
So, I mean, after your first, was it sort of off to the races for you after that first encounter? Like, I guess the Gaia one was first, but then with ayahuasca afterwards was like, okay, I think I'm going to be about the medicine. Was that,
the first one was the taster. And I was like, this is interesting. I need to explore it more. And so a month later, I located a different facilitator in Victoria and I sat with him. The second one was pretty, whatever your standard ayahuasca trip is. And then the third one was a full-scale entity exorcism from my solar plexus. And that was sort of a, crazy full-on death, rebirth, shaking, throwing. I was that guy in the ceremony, basically, that's kind of disrupting everything. And had this thing pulled out of me. And that's when I had the communication to ayahuasca. I had to make a deal with whatever the spirits. I think it was the ayahuasca. A lot was going on. They said, hey, do you want to remove this thing? And I said, yeah, just get it out of me, please. I was screaming this, by the way, at the time. And they're like, well, then you're going to make a promise that you quit being such a selfish fuck and, live for other things other than you. And so I went, okay, please. And then they pulled it out of me. It was this weird black cloud covered in eyes. And it was like just trying to claim my soul. And I was like yelling at it. I was throwing all sorts of negative energy. And then I was getting instructed to give it love. So I was trying to love it. And eventually that's what sort of pulled it out of me. And then I threw up. I didn't throw up physical puke though. It was more just like this sound, like bleh! And then the next day I realized I wasn't depressed anymore. So that was like 11 years of undiagnosed, pretty severe. You know, when I was just so depressed for so long, I just assumed that was reality.
Reality,
And it
yeah.
was only when I had it taken out of me that I was like, oh, I'm really happy and I can smile now. And I'm not drawn to like drinking myself into a stupor every night or smoking loads of weed. So that's when I was like, holy shit, what the fuck is this? Like, I had like 150% more energy. And yeah, so I came down again, drank a couple more times, got instructed to go back, find my ancestry, connect with that. So I went on this whole crazy journey to find myself in a really cliched way, do charity work. And then I ended up in America, trying to get to South America, found some random ayahuasca group on the internet, sat with this crazy shaman who's like a cross between Anthony Robbins and an Italian Ayahuasquero. And that's when I got called. It said, this is your path, you're doing this. And I sort of made contact with my grandfather, who was a Chinese herbalist and healer's DNA field. And all of a sudden it just was like this switch was turned on me. And I was like, oh shit, this is what I have to do now. And this is what I can do. And then I ran like hell for about a year. Oh, no, about 7 months. And eventually the panic attacks got too much. So I was like, okay, let's do this.
Classic resisting of the call. Was that when you decided, well, maybe I'll give this comedy thing a go again? Or
I was doing comedy all through that period. So I
Right.
wish I'd recorded these sets because they were quite funny, because I was drinking a lot of ayahuasca. I'd go on stage. I'd be like, hey, you know, when you get an evil spirit taken out of your solar plexus, and crickets, and be like, hey, you know, what's the deal with this war of light versus darkness going on? And we have to pick a side now. And people be like,
See, if
what?
I was in the audience, Nick, I'd be like, woo, he says what everyone's thinking.
It was always like 3 people. I was like, I need to be more organized and find these 3 people and collect them. So I think my catchphrase during that period was like, I don't even know who I am anymore, because I was going through a classic spiritual emergence sort of phenomena crisis period. That was full of panic attacks and anxiety.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. It's interesting you said earlier that you kind of moved through the circus lineage to the healer lineage, but I wonder if it's not that both haven't been transmuted and sort of blended, because obviously the host ceremony is literally that, right? It is a circus.
Yeah. Well, I'm heading towards that direction of synthesizing the two. I'm just not sure what it looks like, and probably next year I'll be getting into that more. Yeah, but I have found that comedy, you have to pick your moments if you're running a ceremony, and you try to inject some comedy, because
That's true.
sometimes people really aren't in the framework to sort of take a joke. So, and you can come across as insensitive. So I had to sort of learn how to read the crowd, the different crowd.
Yeah, there is comedy in it. Like it's another example, I think, of it being a different being, because it actually has a different sense of humor and I find this with a lot of spirits. And ayahuasca, of course, is very much about the vomit and the poop and so on. Like there's a very childish slapstick sense of humor in it, and it's like poop jokes. It's like
dude.
Yeah.
The poop jokes undercut the trauma being worked through. You know, people can be going through such an intense trauma release, PTSD healing, and then someone farts or throws up violently. There's been so many scenes and sessions that I've been at where I'm like, they should make a sitcom about this world. It would be so funny with all the characters, all the shaman egos working around, all the, you know, it's hilarious stuff. But yeah, I never found ayahuasca to have such a, I found it quite stern personally, but I think that's related to my mother issues. But I have found that the Australian acacia brews tend to have more of a sense of humor. So usually I work with the Australian acacias. So they're this non-traditional brew. And I find that the Australian plants have a lot more of a down-to-earth sort of piss take, like an Aussie humor, basically.
Right. So that for people which is the majority of the audience who are unaware of this, like start at the top with a sort of a brief overview of acacia as an entheogen, what it's like, where, if at all, and that's the leading question. It has historically been involved in indigenous practices, and also how you landed on it. Like, what was your first time with it, and what you think's going on there?
Acacia It's one of the few plants that's it's used all over the world. Apparently, there's suggestions that it was used by the Tibetan Vajrayana sects. They have an attar of the acacia grove, which she's literally holding a Kadiravani staff of DMT containing acacia. So they reckon they were using that as initiation medicine. The Sufis, the Egyptian Book of the Dead references the acacia as a tree of death. Ark of the Covenant was made out of acacia wood. Christ was wearing a crown of acacia thorns. So there's all these references all through the world. And even the Australian Indigenous people here use various acacias, including psychoactive ones. I've definitely, it's a secret, so I can't really go into it because I don't want to get ritually murdered, but it happens. So, but it seems to be much more of a secret plant. It's different, but I feel they're coming out right now because obviously shit's hitting the fan and the plants are just ambassadors for Gaia. And they're like, all right, let's just chuck this in the mix and see what happens. And so, yeah.
That's
so
that's important not to zip past, because I think so too. I think it's the Ents arriving, right? Like,
yeah.
There's been I was out of Australia for 15 years and I've certainly got better at magic in those 15 years. And that's a factor, but I come back and it's much more communicative country and various spirits and so on, like, because it's very serious now, right?
It's very serious.
I find that interesting. I love, because I also, again, for people who don't know, acacia as a ritual practice in non-Indigenous or peri-Indigenous Australia is new, in the sense that it's a over the last several decades a build out of communication and experience and ritual and so on. And at the beginning of it, and sort of threading its way through, is this an Aboriginal practice? Did they use it in this certain way, and so on? And and I think it's a perfect example of this, where we can't ever adequately answer that question is because acacia, or the acacias, are beings, and you don't actually need to consume them to be in communication with them. So particularly if you're an Aboriginal Australian culture. So the whole, like, well, did Aboriginal cultures use acacia? It's like, first of all, they wouldn't say use. Second of all, yes. Third of all, that says nothing about whether they would turn a psychoactive acacia into a brew or a smokable or something, right? And so we can't even get it. We go looking for a Western frame of interaction in a collection of cultures that never had them, and that's like a thing that I find really interesting. But it's sort of, less so now, but it has historically been contentious, and it's still fraught to be in relation to plant beings of this country for people like you and I, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it also, obviously, the Indigenous Australians are 500 sort of different tribes, so you don't really know which ones used what. And also, it's a hotly debated topic because people are like, well, did they have pots? How would they prepare this? Part of me wonders. I spent a month in the desert with some mob, and what I noticed from being with them was that they were super connected anyway. They were just like talking to ancestors constantly, seeing spirits. So I was like, do they even need this? Maybe we need it because we're so disconnected. But I feel like because the trust has been so broken between the colonized cultures and the indigenous cultures, and because there's a time frame, the plant's like, hey, look, you don't really need to we don't belong to anyone. Okay, obviously you have to have respect with certain plants in relation to their previous custodians, but they're just. And an interesting story is there's actually a specific acacia I won't name because it's microendemic to a certain area and I don't want it to get fucked with too much. But when the new wave of white fellas started working with it, it wasn't communicative at all. It actually took 3 to 4 years of people using it before it developed a communication interface. And now it's very talkative. Now it seems to be, it reminds me of this quote. I can't remember who said it, but it said, it's not you taking the plants just like that. It's also the plants are taking us as well. So it needs to be this shared field. So
yes, absolutely. And that, I mean, that I think is what's kind of interesting about the acacia space, is that it's like the last 20 minutes of Close Encounters of the Third Kind,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you're learning how to communicate at the same time as you're urgently communicating.
Yes, pretty much. Yep, yep. That's it. And yeah, and I feel like it is exciting. It's like a new field because we're a new country. Well, the colonized
Yeah.
culture is a new country. So, lineages that were developed in Peru or Tibet, they don't necessarily ground so well here because lineages, I feel, while they're amazing, they are localized to where they came from. So I feel like what's happening now with the acacia sort of traditions that seem to be happening here, it's for the people of this land, the colonized people who are like, hey, you know, like I'm not going to relate to a jaguar icaro. I've never met a jaguar. I've met a kookaburra, so I think that's why these acacias are coming through now.
Yeah, it's sort of like the end hypothesis works across a bunch of stuff. If you look from sort of, I guess, maybe the late 80s up until now, there's
Mm.
been this sort of and it's certainly something that the colonial culture does not deserve in any way, shape, or form. But it appears to be that the situation is so urgent, and I think it is, that a whole bunch of gifts, and urgent gifts, are being kind of offered, like a different way of
Mhm.
thinking. And I think about stuff like the songline of the Seven Sisters exhibition, and all the fact
Yeah,
that there's all this country medicine that
yeah,
is showing up, hopefully in the nick of time, but certainly in the final act.
yeah. Well, it's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
It already is. It already is.
Got that right. So
Yeah.
how do you get from that moment of like, okay, so I will stop running from this call, to, especially when we are talking about being in novel medicine spaces, right? How do
Yeah.
you get from there to where you are now in Darwin?
Oh, geez, man. This is like a 6-hour conversation, which
Fair
has
enough.
no real linear thread. Basically, once I was like, okay, this is happening. Um, how do I teach myself? So I was trying to find teachers, and the one teacher I was going to go work with died. I was like, okay, so much for that. And so I was guided to the self-initiation process, the self-taught process. Obviously, I don't recommend this for anyone, and I'm not bad-mouthing lineages. That's a very much safer way to do it. So I managed to make friends with a fella called Julian Palmer. He
Mhm.
was a bit of a notorious tryptamine cowboy on the scene. And so he's all about DIY. So I just figured, all right, well, I'm going to just try and do as many psychedelics as possible of as many different varieties. And then I'll just let the plants teach me. It was actually during my first solo journey. The plants were like, you don't need a teacher. We'll just teach you. That's how you even learn in a lineage. You just go sit in the woods. You just have a guy to check in with you. So I started drinking whatever I could get my hands on. I think during 2018, I was drinking most weeks, which was, I wouldn't recommend. I was pretty much insane for most of that year. I was going through full blown spiritual emergency phenomena, really ungrounded, didn't live anywhere. I was just sort of running these little circles and sort of just on the road. And it was a really exciting time, but I was very stressed at the same time. Like I was having to deal with a lot of stuff. So it was a sort of sink or swim, a sort of time for me. And I totally got lost, although I didn't realize it at the time. And then this is the unabridged version, basically. And then I did a boga, and that pretty much just grounded me completely and brought me back down to my earth shit. Because basically, with drinking every week, you get lost in the cosmos too much.
Mhm.
And I forgot about my earthly duties. I was using it to spiritually bypass my own fucking bullshit. And so eventually the Iboga was like, hey, you don't live anywhere and you don't have any like livelihood. What are you doing with your life? You're 36. Like, what's the deal? And so that was really troubling. And I kind of had a second freak out. And then I was in Darwin running some medicine. And then my share house, I was trying to move into Sydney, fell through. And then a lovely friend of mine was just like, why don't you just stay here until you work out things? And then 3 years later, I'm still here. So it was the perfect place to ground, though. Darwin is a very amazing place.
I haven't been since I was a kid, but I was obsessed with it. And it's funny because I literally live remote. Like I live in southern Tasmania. I am closer to Antarctica than I am to the top end, right? So, but I feel like Darwin is remote in the science fiction sense because it's like a spaceport. It's the things that are there combine really incongruously, like, oh, what lovely beaches, which you must never go in.
Yeah.
And like everything in it can kill you, but sort of like the oil rig fly in fly out types and the different cultures, and so it's actually much closer to Australia's neighbors than I am, certainly. But it feels like remote because there's just, I can't think of anywhere like it on the planet. Like it's like a space outpost. Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah. It's just, it's really real. It's like being in Australia in the 1980s. You're still allowed to be a weirdo because it's just too hot. It's too hot to give a shit about much things. It's really egalitarian. And yeah, there's just the weird combination of people coming in. Everyone who's in Darwin has some kind of weird story. A lot of them are ex-cons for some weird reason or running from extreme trauma because the energy is really slow here and it's very relaxing and the heat keeps you in your body. So I'm finding there are a lot of sort of trauma survivors up here. So everyone's kind of, and also because everything here kind of kills you, everyone's kind of humble. So
I don't think, sort of again, foreigners don't realize, you look at that lovely beach and your first thought is, of course, the crocodiles, which very true, but also box jellyfish. And just because the crocodile gets you first doesn't mean there aren't tiger sharks and bull sharks that will get you. So
and the irukandji.
Like, that's true. So there's everyone has this stereotype of Australia being a place where everything can kill you, and it's true, but it's especially true somewhere like Darwin. It's not, you end up with crocodiles in the pool once a year. Like it's,
I saw a crocodile as roadkill just like 5 minutes from my house. And I was like, wow, what a place. I went driving at the national park name, not even national park. It's like a dam. And there was just a crocodile on the road. I was like, this place is great. So yeah, I love it. It's like the northern frontier and Tasmania is the southern frontier. So there's a lot in common that I've seen.
I think so. It's certainly like the 80s here.
I saw the video easies.
Certainly like the 80s, and it's certainly slower, fewer ex-cons. And it's weird. I was having a conversation with a friend about that, who's an American friend who's like trying to understand, because obviously we're on another island. He's like, is this where when everyone's on the run, they end up? And I'm like, no, because the ferry's really expensive.
Yeah. The Daintree out here is where you go.
Exactly. I said they tend to go north instead. And hide out in kind of the tropical wilds. And I'm like, oh, fair enough.
Definitely.
I mean, I'm not impugning you in any way, Nick. I'm not saying that's what you're doing.
No, I'm proud of being an NT resident for the next few months. So yeah.
Excellent. One of the things, and it's sort of, I want to thread, because I think this is important, and it kind of comes back to how we've been talking about what the medicine can do in conjunction with like right living. And even that's a bit unfair, or even that carries too much judgment. Because you wrote this piece in January, because it's New Year's and whatever, about when people typically set resolutions and all the rest of it. What it really, really struck me, because you essentially came for everyone's childhood dream.
Well, I guess so. Oh, not necessarily. There's a sort of turnaround towards the end for people. Anyway, go on.
And I kind of think, especially now, this is a mirror of what happened with ayahuasca with me the other week. There is some painful and essential work I think everyone needs to do at the moment about looking at what they think they want first, because typically what you think you want, this is the childhood dream, isn't invariably what you actually, what the sort of more expanded or developed you might ultimately want. And also that it's not going to happen. That's the bit.
Probably not.
And I think that's kind of important in both cases, right? So, I mean, talk us through what you sort of mean the difference between, come for childhood dreams. Lay it on us. Like
Ah,
where the critique is for you there.
well, I guess my point was like a lot of the time when you're coming up with your childhood dreams, I feel like they're in reaction to some kind of unhealed wounds for a lot of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why else would people want to be famous? Because obviously they've got some kind of self-esteem issues, or they don't feel like they're anyone. They need to be seen. And so we don't really think them through before we get on the bandwagon and start chasing them. And then often I've heard plenty of my comedian friends, when they get them, they're like, oh, this is it, really? Maybe a few weeks of happiness, and then, all right, now I'm dissatisfied again, so let's keep going. And I guess I don't know, I think the time for sort of self-orientated dreams, especially, that's coming to a close. And
Yeah.
that's the sort of extension of what I see the human race stuck at a sort of adolescent level of development,
Yeah.
sort of a larval stage. So we, in lieu of all the shit that's hitting the fan right now, I think these dreams might have to adjust, maybe, or be situated within a wider context of the community, or
Yeah.
maybe even the species. Not that I still don't have that, but it's also just I don't know, man. It's just like, there's a fine line between dreams and illusions, and so you got to be really,
Totally.
and when you're 20, you don't have any critical faculties, you just see
No.
this thing on TV and you're like, oh, okay, I want to be like a criminal lawyer because I watched Law and Order, and then the reality, it's actually far more boring. And so I don't know, I guess it's just about maybe trying to work out who the hell you actually are first before you orientate yourself in a direction. I guess that's what the nut of what I found is.
Well, I mean, it was so good, and I think that unhealed trauma is a really important part of it. So I studied film and I majored in documentary, and the why of that comes back to the like a childhood trauma around, obviously not being seen enough or attracting parental attention and so on. Because when you actually break down what I wanted from a documentary career, it's adventure. So
Yeah.
what I actually wanted was to, go and swim with sharks and go into the jungle and all this stuff that I have in fact done.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if I frame it in documentary, it's two things. One, it's giving me the permission, and this is why you have to sit with your, like, you have to allow the dream, the core or the truth of what the dream is, to come through without the um, pollution of modern framing.
Yeah.
Because it's not just that I needed the unhealed trauma was that I needed to be seen having adventures. It's also
Yeah.
that I couldn't, as an 18-year-old, say, well, actually, I just want to have adventures. Like
Yeah, yeah,
I was
yeah,
not
yeah.
allowed to say that. So I had to build this framework of, oh, I want to study documentary so that I can go and do nature films and whatever. If I was just allowed to say, and I mean, just literally allowed by society to say, well, I just want to have adventures, I would have got into permaculture faster. I would have done all these other things, but
Mm.
I didn't. And so my dream of being a documentary filmmaker is not only not going to happen, I killed it. And it's one of the best things I ever did, right?
Yeah.
Because
Freeze
it
you.
forced me to address trauma, and it forced me to address where we are in the world. And the criminal lawyer is a really good example of the other side of it, which is allow to surface in you what it is you want there. Because I don't think the world, kids who are going to college now, one, I think it's a dumb idea to start with, but I don't know, climbing the Goldman Sachs ladder, like, what do you, I don't
Mm.
think, there's enough runway left for the West if you're
Yeah.
just starting out for that to
Well,
be the case. But it's like, what is it? If you want to be a criminal lawyer, what you actually want to do is, like, I don't know, do you want to have like cool arguments? Do you want to like break it into what the actual desire bits are and see what happens? It's sort of, I don't know. What do you think?
yeah, well, I think it's you have to be careful about like whose dreams are you actually taking on here. I mean, there's so much
Mm,
programming, subconscious programming in all the media that we watch these days that, if you get A, you'll get B. That's been sort of programmed in our heads, but that's actually not the reality of it all. So I don't know. It just gets really sketchy, man. Um, I've lost my train of thought. Yeah.
No, it was more what happens when you kill your dreams is actually quite medicinal, because there's two
Oh,
things,
yeah, yeah.
right? Yeah.
Well, it was the dreams that I had were construct of my mind. And so I found, for me, I've always been disconnected. Like my whole healing journey has been me getting back into my body and into my feelings. And I'm by no means finished, but the mind is full of shit. And so once I killed that mind illusion, I was actually just allowed to be. And that's what my Boga flood dose sort of did. It just kind of destroyed my mind in the best possible way and actually allowed me to tune into deeper realms of myself, which were emanating deep in my body consciousness. And the needs and desires that were actually coming from a deeper, more real place, an embodied place, were far more true and far more rewarding along the path, not just this golden apple hanging on a branch that you had to spend your whole life wasting and suffering just to get this thing that was hollow anyway. So yeah, that's what I found when I was following my body logic or my body mind. Then it didn't even matter where I go with it. It was just like immediately rewarding just to be, it felt right. It didn't sound right or hear right. It just felt right. So yeah, that's what I found.
That last bit's quite important too, right? Which is that, and you actually address it in the piece, that only a tiny minority of people achieve what we consider to be their childhood dream, right? Only a tiny minority of people do. And leaving aside the fact that invariably that will not provide the happiness for them, because happiness comes from doing the inner work anyway. If you don't do that, if you're the overwhelming majority of people, myself included, because I never became a documentary filmmaker, that didn't achieve the childhood dream, if you don't critique that construct, you might actually feel a lot of like
regret and stuff.
Yeah, and like self-hate and a sense of failure and all this that is in the words of Principal Skinner, it is the children who are wrong. Like it's society that's wrong in that situation. It's not you as a failure for failing to achieve. Your failure in that situation is not unpacking what a healthy manifestation of that childhood dream is. But the fact that you didn't become an astronaut, that's the children who are wrong.
Yeah. Well, that's all tied into, what I feel is like conditional love sort of ways of raising kids, where they feel like you have to be this thing in order to be loved. You can't just be loved in and of yourself as who you are. So I think that's what drives a lot of dreams, frankly. Yeah.
I think the final bit of it, which I'm quite looking forward to, and it's it's going to be.
I can't even remember what I wrote. I wrote this like in January.
Oh no, totally. No. I mean, I want to move on from that, because I think the other side of the urgency of critiquing dreams comes back to what I said before. I don't think there's enough runway left for you to start a career in. Like if you're 20, I don't think there's enough runway left in how reality operates at the moment for you to be quietly confident that if you get in on the ground at PricewaterhouseCooper and work for 45 years, you're going to end up like that is going away.
I don't know. I can't say that. Yeah, I have that feeling as well. I mean, I feel with prophecy and stuff like that, the time frame's always questionable, but I'm like, there's so many fronts.
So this was going to be my question, like what is prophecy? Because I have an Old Testament take on it, but when you go, particularly on the medicine path, you do end up inheriting a bunch of prophecies. And it's something Jacques Vallée said, which is important. Just because a message comes from heaven doesn't mean it's not stupid. Is worth holding when we talk about prophecy. But nevertheless, receiving prophecy is part of that sort of spirit interaction. So what do you think it's for? What do you think prophecy is actually for?
I don't know. I've been thinking about this a lot, because you don't want to impose a narrative that you've received from the netherworld and then, make reality shape that. But then again, I mean, you don't need a psychedelic plant to tell you that there's a number of fronts that things are going not so well on. And maybe we can't act the way that we've been acting without facing some consequences to that. So it's because right now we're very stuck in a sort of apocalypse narrative, and people are trying to create a good story where you get out, where everyone survives, and you're like, I don't know if this is really that realistic. So it's I'm still the jury's still out for that, because I feel from what I've received from various plants and what I've checked in with other people, it seems to be a vaguely coherent sort of body of shared collective visions about the upcoming phase that we're going into. I don't know if I'm selectively, you know, picking information to confirm, you know, what I've seen, but I feel like in the end, you got to just pool your resources with everyone, check in with everyone. I saw this, and what did you see, and see how many people kind of have there's overlapping areas of what the future could be, and then also not be tied to it, like be attached to it, like, okay, well then that's a story and that's what's going to happen. Like,
Exactly.
obviously
Yeah.
there has to be a navigation, and I don't know, I believe in some degree that we do have some um independent volition of how, you know, we could change things if we wanted to. Obviously that's pretty difficult to do with where we're at right now, but you know, that sort of stuff.
It's difficult to do in the physical, right? So one of the things, and I'll get back to an Old Testament interpretation of prophecy because I think it holds the key. When I was in London in March of last year and had to flee back as the borders closed behind me, like last helicopter out of Saigon stuff, right? And we've been here ever since. And I can't. It's funny. We use the Qui-Gon Jinn metaphor when we talk amongst the membership about this. There's that scene in the Phantom Menace where he's fighting Darth Maul, and then there's like laser barriers go across, and he's on one side and Darth Maul's on the other. And because he can't do anything, he just like drops down and starts meditating. And it's the most Jedi thing out of any of the films,
Yeah,
and that's possibly the worst of all the films, right? Because when you can't do that, there's always a thing you can do. There's always a place, like, so he's still battling Darth Maul there by like recentering his energy and kind of powering up. So there's always, and this is where this brings in what the language of prophecy is for, right? In the Old Testament, and I heard this from a lecturer at university ages ago, because you look at the Old Testament prophecies now and none of that stuff happens. But it's not what prophets were for in these kind of, Judaic kingdoms. A prophet was supposed to show up and talk about the future in loud and angry terms to change the present. So a prophecy is not about this is what's going to happen. It's that adjust your ways, motherfucker. And so prophecies talk about the future to draw your awareness to your relation to the present. So that's its power, right? And it's almost irrelevant. If it does that, if it does that, then the accuracy of what happens is irrelevant, because especially if it's a successful prophecy. Because if you say of the 7 billion people on Earth, by 2050, only 2 billion will be alive, and you're wrong about that, it's because that prophecy is kind of intervened at a present time level. So prophecy is always about the present. It paints pictures of futures that are it's like the original science fiction. It paints pictures about the future to tell you about the present. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like, I feel like what's going on right now, though, is that we've got multiple sort of prophecies or narratives sort of competing for popularity. And so that's really what I'm seeing is like, you know, the polarization and stuff going, basically people saying, no, this is the prophecy. We're all going to die. And someone like, no, we're going to narrowly make it. And then someone's like, it's all fine. Everything's fine. And you're like, okay, so I think it's the unification of the prophecy that would help catalyze the next phase, whatever that is. But so, I think we're still in the story. It has
totally. It's
happening.
We're still in the story. Yeah, absolutely. And what defines this apocalypse, right, is that everyone's having their own unique version of it. So the person next to you is also going through an apocalypse. It's just not the one you're going through, but it's still
yeah.
And that's,
I mean, you should try an apocalypse in Darwin. It's really laid back.
Yeah. Well, here it isn't. Here it's like trying to ride out the War of the Ring in the Shire. So you're sort of aware it's going on everywhere else.
Yeah.
But I think the polarization is a really interesting one, right? So what defines this apocalypse as it carries on? There are people, even with a 99.8% recovery rate, who think the apocalypse is this terrifying biblical plague assaulting the earth. And there are people, and there is, presumably some merit to that, but there are also people who are like, there is in fact a technocratic elite at the Davos level that is attempting a re-engineering of Western civilization into like a single technocratic governance platform. And there's certainly some truth in that, and all the rest of it. And so everyone's kind of having their own apocalypse at the same time. So the question is what or where you find points of not even agreement, points of connection. Like where's I talk about it as win-win rather than win-lose engagements. Like how do you lasso people together in a win-win context when some people have a very Rockefeller medicine fear-based view of what's going on, and that's kind of where they are, and there are other people who have a 5G causes this or whatever. What do you do with it? I don't know. I'll turn that into a question. What do we do about that, Nick?
You put me on the spot, Gordon. Geez, man. I don't know. I feel back to that Star Wars metaphor. Actually, Bruce Lee does it as well. He gets trapped in a room and there's nothing he can do, so he just sits down and meditates. I think I wouldn't say that's a complete answer, but I think definitely finding your own center in the maelstrom is very useful. And actually, the plants told me that just to find your own center, be very good at remaining centered in very chaotic times. And I feel like what's happening right now is basically because any narrative right now can be confirmed by whatever information you want to find on the internet. I feel like it's almost breaking down our intellectual capacity for navigating the world. So it's actually breaking down I usually navigate with my head, and now I'm like having to find a different way to navigate. So it's actually breaking down my head sense, and I'm having to get into my body and try and reconnect to my instincts. So my instincts don't go into specifics about like on June the 28th, America will invade China, but it just tells me, all right, some shit's going down and you better do these things for yourself. And I feel like whatever is going on is so complex, we can't really control it. We can only really, I don't know, just focus on, I don't know. I hate saying working on myself because that's such a narcissistic, reductive way to say it. But sometimes it has to be a balance. Whatever outwards work has to happen, it has to come from a pretty inwardly solid place. So I think everyone's got a different role to play, and you've got to just work that out yourself. And also, I don't know, get in touch with your own.
One of the things that Charles Eisenstein says that I like is that we have to let go of the idea that only the quantifiable is real when it comes to action and activism and so on, because especially the way the sort of technocratic rollout is going, they've made every kind of theater of conflict or every front in the battlefield is every single body. So it's when you say work on yourself, that's participating in, I don't like war metaphors, that is showing up to the present moment, because the present moment is about physical health and mental health and coherence and togetherness and so on. So that it's showing up to the battle. Again, I don't like this metaphor, but we're going with it, rather than fleeing from it, because that's the battleground. It doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah, I mean, it goes in both directions. And what I spent a little bit of time in the activist community, and what I did see was that there were a lot of wounded people in that state, and no real productive or good action could come from that stuff until they'd worked that out. Obviously, you don't want to be, like the sort of self-absorbed, narcissistic wellness people, but there has to be sort of a middle ground, a balance struck between spiritual growth and sort of personal work.
So you mentioned the spiritual bypass earlier. I completely agree. The political bypass is to pretend that none of that is real. So it's all well and good. It's all well and good to say, I
like that.
To work on the non-physical level, to work at the level of the field, the critique is that's the spiritual bypass while people are going hungry. And I'm like, it can be. But the political bypass is to pretend that none of that stuff is real just because there are hungry people in the world. And no one gets out of gets out of that critique.
It's a spectrum.
But it's also where we are. Like there's this sort of, I heard it described recently, I'm trying to remember where, that what's going on is like a planetary dark night of the soul, which means it
Yep.
presents differently for every single person. And as you say, like the
Mm.
internet can confirm your belief system, but I think what's happening at the moment is it's confirming it to its destruction. So
Yeah.
I could see this from March of last year, but this whole process, and it's currently doing it, is in the process of destroying Rockefeller medicine, because now billions of
Yeah.
people are looking at things like, what is the negative impact of vaccines? How come masks don't work? What does that say about viruses and so on? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can find everything you want to its ultimate destruction. And
Yep.
that, I think, is this apocalypse. I think it is literally the Western worldview. The only thing strong enough to destroy the Western worldview is the Western worldview. And I think that's what it's doing. That's my apocalypse.
I like that.
Seriously.
Yeah. No. I agree. Yeah. 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 Ooh, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, fuck. I had something really good though. Oh man. Oh well.
It'll come and go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I think that's I think it's important stuff, right? Because this comes back to dreams, and maybe this is the episode title, like talking dreams and prophecy with Nick's son. Yes, maybe that'll be the episode title.
That's what I want to say. Yeah, I feel like whatever we're going through right now is some kind of initiation, sort of mass, sort of thing into adulthood of some kind. Because what I've been shown, at least through the plants, is that we're moving to a space where you're going to have to be a sovereign being, but with, freedom sounds all great, but actually the responsibility, that's actually kind of a really fucking heavy thing to carry. And so and also what I also do feel is that we can't evolve in order to avoid crisis. And there's this guy called Christopher Bash, you should check out his book, it's fucking amazing, LSD and the Mind of the Universe. But he talks about how evolution happens within crisis. So you actually need crisis to force the next level up. So maybe that's kind of what I'm seeing right now, is like a lot of novelty happening. And maybe then there'll be a sort of mass culling bottleneck. And then whatever sort of novel systems or new ways of being that hold will then scale, depending on who survives. Yeah. This is what
depending
I've
on who survives. we'll just skirt the actual numbers involved in this darkness of the prophecy. But
there's a lot of luck involved.
There is.
I think you're pretty lucky. You'll be good, Tasmania.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. So one of the things that that is going away with the Western worldview is only the quantifiable is real, right? So what you were talking about there is, and unfortunately we can only talk about it in a quantifiable sense, but the worldview that the only things that is impactful, or that there is a one solution mentality to the planet, is the thing that's ending, and it is being replaced with that sort of sovereign relationality. So it isn't kind of, that's what you have to step into. Again, it's another Eisenstein thing in terms of initiation. He says, he wrote in a piece last year, The Coronation, that a coronation is literally an initiation ritual about stepping into your own responsibility. Because if you think about being crowned, you are initiated into taking responsibility for what's going on in your life. And you think, wow, that's a potent way of looking at it. And I've got similar messages from, all kinds of spirits about sovereign relationality is what is next, at least for the next decade or so. And that's really empowering, I think, because that puts everyone in play. You might think you aren't valuable or useful or big enough, but it's that idea of bigness being the only thing that has value is what's ending. So there's actually a lot of power, a lot of like empowerment.
Well, what I see is, like, unless you're like Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates millionaire, like the one benefits of our current civilization is we don't really have to relate to everyone constantly, right? Because we've got our own little houses and stuff. We don't have to constantly be in relation to everyone. But what I was shown was that we, unless you're these multimillionaires, and even that's sort of questionable, you'll have to move into a community space. And so you'll constantly be in relation with people. and that's going to be really demanding. And ayahuasca actually told me on a journey I did last year, one of the biggest hurdles for you guys is moving from a focused, self-centered individualist culture into a forced communal atmosphere. So you can either start working on it now or just be thrown into the deep end when it happens, if it happens. And so I thought that was very interesting because, I don't know, community living, there's a big community up in here in Darwin, and I'm just only getting into that now. And it's a nightmare sometimes. You have to just deal with people constantly.
This comes back to trauma language and things that we're not good at, right? Because it's not just returning to a communal relation. That's all well and good 50,000 years ago on a savanna somewhere. If you move into a community now, or if you return to awareness of communal relations, better way of saying it, you are in relation with other people's trauma.
You're playing out your familial traumas basically in a community space. And you have to face this stuff constantly. And also with the fractured sort of child rearing practices of the atomic family structure, it's going to be a bit of and the Ibogas also told me, hey, chill out. Don't think like you're going to work out like 2,000 years of bad conditioning in one lifetime. This is going to be an ongoing project for everyone. So just try and clear as much garbage as you can, and then make sure your kids sort of keep doing it.
That's absolutely right. And in fact, the other side of that Western thinking is is prediction rather than prophecy, and the difference is crucial. Like the prediction is this is what's going to happen, and that thinking of like, what do I do next? What do I do?
Be paralyzing.
What does 5 years look like? You have to change to that, to showing up to the present, and thinking in and with the present rather than what do I do? How many cans of food do I need? What, like, when does the war with China start? It's like, this is not.
Well, the thing is, like,
prediction. Yeah.
The other thing that I learned, because like last year I was really in quite an apocalyptic sort of state of being. So I went and did a survival course, and so I spent 7 days like in the woods next to a swamp with this commando dude, learning how to make fire with sticks and shit. And I realized, man, living in the apocalypse would suck. Like, I'm not sure if I'd actually want to do that. I'd rather just perish in the mushroom cloud and then incarnate during the golden age. Like, fuck that shit. So
could not agree more.
I'm not really attached to, it's going to be really hard. Like, so part of me is just like, oh, fuck. Like, why don't we just enjoy the present?
But enjoying the present, being with joy is literally, part of how you show up to the challenges of the moment, because it's refusal to fall into that despair and anger. So it's not just it's not an abnegation of responsibility, it's an assumption of it to be in the joy of the moment, because that's the non-Western thinking. It's so the rapid internal decolonization that has to happen and can happen. It's like it can decompress out of you really quickly, is available. Because I get that. I mean, we've got a bunch of food down here because we live at the end of like global supply chains. So I don't even need to know or predict what it's going to happen, but there's China stuff, there's viral based shutdowns. There's like anything could happen between me and where half the stuff comes from. So it's like, all right, well, we'll have a bit of it. But at some point you do you really want to live on beans for 5 years underground in like a blasted wasteland? Like, what is the point of surviving?
Some people will. Those are the guys who deserve to keep going. So I saw this vision of these like because we've gotten pretty soft as a species. And so on one of my ayahuasca visions, I was shown like the future human, or at least not the ultimate future human, but the next stage human, where they were very tough, very resilient. They had the sensitivity and the vulnerability, but also the toughness to be able to hold that. And also they were incredibly resourceful and adaptable and tough. So it was like this combination of the people who were apocalypse proof. And so
I like it.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm one of those people, but we'll see. You never know.
Well, you could die today. Anyone could. So it's it's redrawing the boundaries of what's important and when things are important, and that's part of the coronation. That's part of that showing up to it. I think that's what I think anyway.
Oh no, I agree, definitely.
Yeah, nice one. So tell us about the book.
Okay, so I'm compiling my book. I'm just writing it now, just so I can get out of the way, because the real book I'm trying to write is an open source. I wouldn't say manual, but it's a hints and tips on psychedelic plant path for the regular person. Because me and my friends realized, man, you can only sort of like, pop 20 people every couple of weeks or whatever, and even then, it's a numbers game. Some people just don't get it anyway. And so really I'm seeing with the self-initiation path, everyone has to start sort of getting on board, and there's going to be a lot of casualties. So let's do the best we can to sort of avoid that. Anyway, so that's the book I haven't written yet. So the main book I'm writing right now is just a compilation of the blogs. So during this whole period of my spiritual emergence, I was writing this blog that was really just me trying to integrate the whole experience as I was going. And then now I'm just sort of trying to collate it into a sort of a Gen X's sort of sarcastic, cynical, humored sort of take on the spiritual awakening process, because I'm a comedian by background. So, the standard comedian thought process is like, okay, what's shit about this thing? And so going from there into the super uncynical ayahuasca realm where everyone's, waving crystals around and everything's true and you can't judge everyone, it was really jarring for me. And I actually went into that phase for a while, which alienated most of my comedian friends from me. And so I'm just trying to find a balance now where it's sort of like, to make it, the plants actually told me you have to make plant medicine spirituality accessible to the South Park generation. So that's what I'm attempting with my book. It's just a sort of spiritual awakening story of my process, I guess. So It hasn't got a title yet. I'm still trying to work it out. It's either No More Trippin' or The Hero with 1,000 Asses. I'm not sure if I really like that second one though.
See, I like it better than the first one, although it could be like a weird gay porn. So
there's bits in that which are suspect, so it could fit into that easily. Yeah, so it just
The Hero with 1,000 Asses bracket no homo.
Sorry to disappoint for my erotic gay readership, but yeah, so it's just trying to track this. There's a book called Spiritual Emergency which tracks. After I went through my process, I read this Stanislav Grof book called Spiritual Emergency, and I read through this and I was like, oh my god, I wish I'd read this book, because this would have like helped me a lot, because it just was like, and then you'll go through this and you'll go through ego inflation and think that you're the chosen one, have alien abduction experiences, and then things will be pretty crazy, and eventually you sort of come back to grounding. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty much what happens. So it's kind of following that process.
And I think
funny.
You're right.
I'm just trying to put as many jokes in as possible.
Totally. But that's part of the medicine. Like, it's good. I've read some of the stuff that some of the encounters and experiences that will end up in the book. And it's not just the comedian's observation of what's going on, because it is ripe for a loving jester-like critique, but also the way that you read yourself to filth is very important and very medicinal. And it is that kind of language of how you this is a messy process to go through, and messy processes are invariably quite humorous. So yeah. And it's one of those books or this is a good example of how big stories don't work anymore. And there is value in small. So that if you had, let's say if it was the 70s, you would go through what you went through, and you would turn it into a guidebook. So you actually would distill the experience rather than share the experience. So you're assuming a level of like superhuman expertise to turn what you went into a guidebook, or sort of like a fictionalized Castaneda metaphor of teaching. And that world isn't that way of sharing insight has run its course, I think. I think it's reached the people that it was going to reach, and that includes us probably.
Definitely great books.
But the way stories, because I've actually got a book coming out that isn't exactly like that, but also isn't. It's going to be, or also is, like it's my most personal book because it's my animism book. And the only way that can come out is in relation to me and place and my experiences, or else it's not the animism book, right? It's not actually it.
Yeah.
And I think there's real, like, I think there's medicine in the approach. We just don't have the language. So we're inclined to dismiss it as just a personal account because we've diminished personal accounts, but all of reality is a personal account.
Well, that's it. And right now, I think we're going through this whole phase where everyone's an expert now, and we have to listen to the experts, and it's really discounting like the punters on the grounds sort of point of view. And especially in the spiritual sort of world, everyone's a guru, and they're always talking down to you like, oh, this is what it's like. And it's just like, actually, I don't know. I wouldn't want anyone to be like, you're an authority, Nick. I'm going to listen to you. But I think that it needs to be more grounded, so to be on the same level as the reader, ideally, and just saying, hey, this is what I encountered. Maybe if you don't do this, that will happen, that sort of thing. So, yeah. So that's why I think, especially right now where there's such mass distrust of a lot of experts now.
And rightly so. Like expertisism, like Rockefeller medicine, is one of the pillars of Western civilization that is destroying itself. So as we're recording, depending on when this comes out, like all those Fauci emails have come out about him going like, yeah, we know masks don't work. Yes, we shouldn't have had lockdowns for anyone under 60. And yes, they probably funded some blah, blah, blah in Wuhan. And so you've had this ancient psychopath on TV destroying people's lives for a year and a half because he's an expert. And now we're getting to see behind the curtain of expertisism. We're actually seeing that it is this, that it is a public performance of power rather than any kind of like inherent thing. And so I mean, coming back to the books that I think are medicinal for now and moving forward, it is not those expertisist tracts because, and you know this yourself, even though we might have read personal accounts that have been turned into guidebooks or to-do lists going through our own journey. When you think about the books that have changed your life or that have stayed with you, it's actually only pieces that have stayed with you. And it's because they're embedded in like there's 3 lines that spoke to you at that moment about something in your life that changed it. So even the expertisis books are messy personal accounts. Like a book is nothing but an encounter between like the writer and the reader. So all these books are like messy personal accounts, I think.
Yeah, just some pretend to not be that way.
Yeah. And the pretense has to go. The pretense is leave that in the 20th century with expertise.
It ties back down to the sovereign self and the empowerment process of people going, okay, well, I got to work it out my way because I'm not an expert. And especially with psychedelics, I mean, who the fuck really knows what's going on sometimes in there? So,
absolutely.
I've never seen snakes on ayahuasca. I've never met elves. No, I've seen snakes on the day that I was going to drink ayahuasca, but they were real snakes. Right. I've never seen McKenna's elves. Actually, I saw them once. Okay. Well, I don't know if they're McKenna's elves, but I
haven't seen them on ayahuasca. I saw them on Salvia divinorum. And no one else who's I've spoken to about Salvia divinorum saw that, but I saw like like the Warhammer like lizard people race. I don't know. But I saw them but they were moving like machine elves, and I'm like, huh. What do you know?
Yeah, exactly. So, who knows in the end?
Exactly. All right. Well, this is great. I knew it was going to be good. And I knew we'd land on the topic, and we got to like dreams and prophecy and kind of like how to be with the future rather than how to predict it. So
yeah, I think is the key word. That's what I've found.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, from what I've worked with Iboga, it's shown me how when you're in your mind, you're always in the future or the past. But if you're in your body, then you're always in the moment. And then you don't even have to, I don't even have to do anything. I'm one of those guys where every time I try to make something happen with my mind, like I will achieve this, it would always go to shit. And now that I'm more in my body, relatively speaking, still work to go, then I don't even have to do anything. It just sort of happens naturally. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's the next piece. So I never, it's like that RPG game, where the next square of the map appears. But,
yes, exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah. But I don't know. We both live in magical realities, so I don't know if that's going to really be applicable to people who are working at Goldman Sachs who have a 5-year plan.
Well, if they're listening to this show, they're a spy at Goldman Sachs. So I don't think you get 90 minutes into this talk without, unless you're living in a magical reality. But I like that square thing. That's really cool because the difference to being in relation to time in the future is to be in relation to the present, to not have this that map, because it's that same disembodied mind-based expertise approach. And I like that you show up to the moment because it requires you to trust you and to be in like a trusted relation with what's around you and the near time. And nothing that's come from that has I don't want to say nothing that's come from that has ever been wrong.
Well, I mean, wrong's a heavy word, but I mean, especially right now, everything's so complicated. You can't compute it. You, as one person with 4 kilos of meat in your skull, there's no way you can compute all the variables going on right now. So it's corny, but it's like, wow, I really just have to trust my felt bodily heart, gut, brain unified experience as my guiding light. And that's kind of like the sovereignty is like finding your own inner guidance instead of relying on these experts to go, all right, go over, do this and do that. It's like, that's kind of what it's coming to. But it's a matter of purifying or aligning yourself as correctly as possible, which is a nightmare sometimes.
But like it's a good place to sort of leave the conversation off because it's situated people, I think, in relation to the future after a chat about prophecy and dreams. So I'm into it.
All right, sweet.
Nice one. So tell people where they can find out more about you and what you got going on and all the rest of it.
I've got a blog that's semi-operational while I finish my book. That's Nixon at medium.com. And this book I will have done by the end of this year. So got one more draft to go. I'm just plowing through it at the food court near my house every day.
Really? That's cool.
Yeah. And then I'll get on to writing more, and I'll be probably doing more podcasty stuff next year when I move to the Sunshine Coast.
Right. That's interesting. Like a food court book. All right.
I found it more productive for me to write there. Yeah. So,
I'm personally interested in that, right? Because of, my last few books up until the one I did here, I've written I was going to write this one in Cusco, but I've written in New York and London and whatever. I didn't actually know how to write a book that wasn't like on airplanes and so on. And obviously this last one, I did have to.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested in which places inform the books. And there's something perfect about a Darwin food court.
Oh yeah.
Informing this book. That's so good.
That's the editing process right there.
Yeah, nice. Well, all right, sir. Thank you very much. Great to chat.
Thank you, Gordon.
And good luck with it all.
All right, no worries. Thanks heaps.